Level 1. The first drop. You're 9 years old and your dad shakes you awake at 5 a.m. on a Saturday in December. The dashboard reads 4 degrees. You don't say anything because you don't want him to know you're scared. He hands you a 5-gallon bucket, a spud bar, and a hand auger that weighs more than your backpack. You step out onto Lake Winnebago in the dark, and the ice cracks somewhere far off. A deep boom that rolls under your boots like the lake is clearing its throat. You freeze. Your dad doesn't stop walking. He says the loud cracks are the safe ones. It's the silent ice you worry about. And keeps going like that settles it. Boots crunching slowly over a thin dusting of snow. Your breath fogging out in front of you, and freezing on your jacket collar, before you've even reached the first spot. You follow, because you don't want to be the kid standing alone on a frozen lake at 5 a.m. He teaches you to drill straight down, no leaning. Let the blade do the work. Your first hole takes 9 minutes, and your shoulders burn for an hour afterward. His takes 20 seconds. He's fished this lake for 25 winters. You've fished it for 9 minutes. He drops a small jig tipped with a spike below the hole and hands you the rod without another word. Nothing happens. 10 minutes pass, then 20. Your toes go numb inside boots that are one size too big. You tell him this is boring. He tells you to stop watching the hole and start watching the rod tip. 5 minutes later it twitches, barely. The kind of movement you'd miss if you looked away for 1 second. You lift the rod the way he showed you, a short snap, not a yank. Something on the other end fights back, and a yellow perch the size of your hand comes flopping up through the hole onto the snow. Gasping in air, it was never built to breathe. You've never felt your hands shake from something other than cold. Your dad doesn't cheer. He just nods, like the lake owed you that one and finally paid up. You ask if you can catch another. He laughs and drills a second hole without you even asking twice. On the drive home, heater blasting, you ask if you can go again next weekend before he's even parked the truck. He tells you the ice only gets better from here, all the way through February. And something about the way he says it makes the whole winter feel different than it did yesterday. You don't know it yet, but you just got hooked on something bigger than fish. Level 2, the backyard regular. You're 12 now, and you've worn your parents down enough to get your own combo rod, a plastic sled bucket, and a hand auger you bought off a neighbor for $15. You're not allowed on real lake ice alone yet, so you work the retention pond 2 streets over, the one that freezes solid by mid-December every year. You learn the difference between black ice, clear, dense, safe, and the milky white slush ice that looks the same from a distance but holds half the weight. You learn it from a safety chart your dad taped inside your tackle box, not from falling through, and you're grateful for that every single time you step out. You drill 6 holes across the pond because a forum post said, "Moving finds more fish than waiting does." Most holes give you nothing. You don't get discouraged. You get curious. You start noticing that holes near the drop-off, where the pond falls from 4 feet to 9 feet, produce more bites than the shallow flats ever do. You don't have the word structure yet, but you're already fishing like you do. You mow lawns for 2 months and save up for a used Vexilar flasher. The screen cracked on one corner, sold to you half price by a guy your dad knows from work. It shows you a green ring for bottom and orange blips for fish suspended in the water column, moving in real time. The first time you watch a red mark rise toward your jig and dart away right before it bites, something clicks that no video ever explained to you. The fish can feel you hesitate. You start jigging with intention, instead of just dropping bait and waiting. Small lifts, short pauses, a rhythm instead of a shrug. Your catch rate doubles inside a month. Your older cousin starts asking to tag along, and you let him, mostly so you can show him what you've figured out on your own. You start watching the Weather Channel the way other kids your age watch cartoons, tracking cold fronts, tracking the barometer, because you've noticed the bite dies the day before a storm and comes alive the day after one, and knowing that feels like a secret nobody else your age is in on. If you felt that first twitch already, hit subscribe now, because it only gets colder and better from here. Level 3, the real lake kid. You're 15, and you finally get access to real water. Gull Lake, 20 minutes from your house. The kind of lake locals fish from first ice to last. Your first solo walkout. You stall at the access point, reading a safety sign for longer than you need to. A guy fishing 40 yards off waves you over, tells you the ice is held steady at 11 inches for 2 weeks. You're fine. He's got a flip-over shanty, a portable shelter that pops open over a sled in under a minute. And inside it's 40 degrees warmer than outside, because the dark fabric traps sunlight like a greenhouse. He shows you a real flasher mounted on his sled and walks you through jigging cadence. Fast and aggressive for perch, slow and subtle for walleye, a stop and hover for crappie suspended mid-column. 3 completely different rhythms for 3 species sharing the same 11 inches of ice. You learn ice fishing isn't one skill, it's a dozen stacked on top of each other. And most beginners only ever learn the first one. You study a topographic map of the lake bottom before you ever drill, marking points, humps, and channels where fish stack up in cold water, the same way a deer hunter reads a trail before he ever raises a bow. You save up and buy your first gas auger, a Strike Master, and the first time you pull the cord and it rips through 10 inches of ice in 8 seconds instead of the 4 minutes your hand auger used to take, you feel upgraded as a person, not just a fisherman. You start fishing the first and last hour of daylight, the windows locals call the bite windows, when walleye slide shallow to feed and everything else on the lake goes quiet at once. You land your first walleye over 20 inches on a Tuesday morning before school and show up 40 minutes late because you couldn't make yourself leave the hole while the bite was still on. Your teacher doesn't believe the excuse until you pull up the photo on your phone. You start a small notebook in your tackle box, water temp, wind direction, moon phase, jig color, because a local told you the fish that bit yesterday aren't the same fish that'll bite tomorrow. And the only way to know the difference is to track it instead of trusting memory. 6 months of notes later, you can predict the 2-hour window a specific lake will turn on before you've even driven there. Sitting in your truck at 4 a.m., flipping through months of handwriting instead of guessing the way everyone else on the lake still does. And every single time you're right, it feels less like luck and more like a language you've finally learned to read. Other regulars on Gull Lake start asking what you're marking on your flasher, and you realize somewhere along the way you stopped being the kid who tagged along and became someone people check in with before they drill. Level 4, the tournament rookie. You're 18, and a buddy from the lake tells you about the Brainerd JC's ice fishing extravaganza on Gull Lake, the largest ice fishing tournament on Earth. 10,000 holes drilled in a single morning. Cash prizes for the biggest walleye and the biggest panfish. You've never fished under real pressure before. You show up at 6 a.m. to a parking lot jammed with trucks pulling sleds, augers, and buckets of gear that cost more than your car did. The horn sounds and thousands of anglers scatter across the ice in every direction, each one chasing a spot they scouted for weeks. You drill on a hump you found on a mapping app 300 yards offshore, promising contour lines and nothing else. 2 hours pass with no bites. You watch a competitor 100 yards away pull 3 fish in 20 minutes, and it hits you that scouting matters more than gear ever will. You move, drill again, still nothing. Your hands are shaking now, not from the cold, but from the clock running out. With 30 minutes left, you make one more move to a break line you spotted on the depth finder, and drop a jigging spoon tipped with a minnow head. The flasher shows a mark rising fast off the bottom. You set the hook, and a 26-inch walleye comes up through the hole, heavier than anything you've ever pulled through ice in your life. You don't win. You place 12th out of thousands, but the fish qualifies you for the leaderboard, and your name gets called at weigh-in in front of a crowd that now knows who you are. A guy from a regional fishing show asks for your name and your hometown for the recap article, and hearing your own name read back to you off his notepad feels bigger than the fish did. Standing there, you realize this could be more than a hobby you do before school. Level 5, the sponsored angler. You're 22, and 3 years on the North American ice fishing circuit have built you a name on the regional trail. You fish 15 events, cash checks in 5 of them. And your name starts meaning something to the couple hundred serious anglers who take this circuit seriously. A tackle company reaches out, small, not a household name, but real. They send free gear in exchange for tagging their jigs in your catch photos. It's not a paycheck yet, but it's the first sign someone outside your own circle thinks you're good enough to represent something bigger than yourself. You start filming your trips, not for money, just because people keep asking questions in the comments and you like answering them. You upgrade to a live sonar unit that shows fish moving in real time instead of static blips on a dial, and it changes how you fish completely. You watch a walleye approach your jig, hesitate, and either commit or peel off, and you adjust your stroke in the half-second that actually matters. You start guiding a handful of trips a season for extra cash, taking out guys who've never ice fished and just want to catch something, anything, to justify standing in the cold. Watching a grown man land his first lake trout through 8 inches of ice on Lake Winnebago and start laughing like a kid, unable to stop himself, teaches you something about why you do this that no tournament check ever has. You start turning down easy money jobs during peak ice season because guiding pays less, but gives you back something the circuit had quietly been taking from you. The reason you picked up a rod in the first place. Level 6, the circuit grinder. You're 26, and you're fishing the national trail now. Bigger lakes, bigger fields, 300 competitors at some stops, purses worth thousands of dollars. You've moved past your home water to fish places with real reputations. Lake of the Woods, straddling the Minnesota-Ontario border, famous for giant walleye. Devil's Lake in North Dakota, known for producing state record perch some seasons. The travel is expensive. Gas, motels, entry fees, and you're not always cashing checks big enough to cover it. Your girlfriend asks when this becomes sustainable, and you don't have a clean answer for her. You do have 3 top 10 finishes this season, and a growing sponsor list that now includes an auger brand and an electronics company. Enough to offset costs even if it isn't a living yet. Though your girlfriend keeps a running tally in her head of exactly what this hobby has cost the two of you this season. And you've learned not to ask her for the number out loud. You learn things at this level recreational anglers never encounter. How a barometric pressure swing shuts bites down hours before a front even arrives. How your auger noise on shallow clear water can spook fish if your timing and drilling technique aren't careful. How to fish through absolute crowds, 100 holes drilled within a quarter mile of yours, and still find the 2 feet of structure nobody else identified, because they were all copying each other, instead of reading the map themselves. You finish third at a major event on Devil's Lake, your best result yet, and the check is big enough that for one season, this actually pays for itself. You also learn what it costs beyond money. You miss your best friend's wedding because it lands on the same weekend as a qualifier you can't afford to skip. You miss your dad's 60th birthday the same way a year later, and he tells you it's fine, but you can hear that it isn't, not all the way. You start scheduling your whole year, relationships included, around the ice fishing calendar, the same way you once scheduled it around school. Nobody warns you that chasing a trophy walleye at 26 takes the same discipline as chasing a career. You're only now understanding the two were never really separate. You start icing your knees after long days on the sled, start noticing the cold gets into your joints faster than it used to, and you brush the thought aside the way you brush aside anything that suggests the clock is already running on this too. Level 7, the professional. You're 30, and you've qualified for the U.S. Open of Ice Fishing, the sport's biggest domestic stage, where only the top anglers in the country earn a spot each year. The field here is different. Guys who've fished at this level for 15 years. Guys with full sponsorship deals who don't work regular jobs anymore because winnings and appearance fees cover their lives completely. You're the newcomer, and everyone on the ice knows it. Practice days are intense, every competitor scouting with electronics, marking waypoints, sharing almost nothing outside their small circle of trust. You find a school of suspended perch on a mid-lake hump using your live sonar, holding at 22 feet over 30 feet of water, a pattern you've never specifically targeted before. You dial in a finesse jig, a tiny spoon tipped with a single spike, worked with a slight quiver instead of an aggressive lift that would spook fish this deep and this pressured. Day 1. You finish 10th. Day 2. You refine the presentation based on what you learned overnight and finish 5th. Combined, you place 7th overall, your best result on the biggest domestic stage the sport offers, and standing on the podium with anglers you'd only ever watched in recap videos growing up. You catch yourself checking if this is actually real before you let yourself smile for the cameras. Sponsors take notice immediately. You sign your first real contract, one that pays an actual base salary in exchange for appearances, seminars, and content, not just free gear anymore. You call your dad from the parking lot before you even tell your girlfriend, and he goes quiet on the other end for a second. Before he says he always figured this would happen, he just didn't know it would take this long to say it out loud to you. Level 8, the icon. You're 37, and you've won 2 national titles and represented Team USA at the World Ice Fishing Championship, an international event held on a different frozen lake each year, with teams from Russia, Finland, and Poland competing for a trophy most Americans have never heard of. But that means everything inside this specific world. You've fished frozen water on 3 continents by now. You stood on a lake in Kazakhstan in conditions so cold your electronic screen cracked mid-competition. And you fished blind for the last 2 hours reading the rod tip the exact way you did as a 9-year-old with your dad on Lake Winnebago, nearly 30 years earlier. And you still finished top 15 overall. You run seminars now at outdoor shows, teaching technique to rooms of 200 people who've fished for 20 years themselves, and still take notes when you talk about jig cadence and rod sensitivity. You design your own signature jig with a manufacturer, a small profit-sharing deal that finally makes winters financially stable instead of a gamble you take every season. You mentor a 19-year-old rookie on the trail who reminds you painfully of yourself, hungry, underfunded, drilling in spots nobody else trusts yet. You share waypoints with him you'd never have shared with a competitor 5 years ago, because you understand now that the sport grows when knowledge moves through it instead of getting hoarded by whoever got there first. You watch him ice his first tournament fish on a spot you handed him for free, and the grin on his face standing over that hole is close enough to your own first perch 30 years ago that it catches you off guard for a second. Standing there on the ice with your own gear bag at your feet. Level 9, the legend. You're 51. You've stepped back from full-time competition, but your name still opens doors everywhere in this world. Manufacturers still call for input on new gear before it hits shelves. A film crew followed you for an entire season, and the footage of you landing a state record lake trout through 14 inches of ice at 4:40 in the afternoon, with 20 minutes of daylight left, has been watched by more people than have ever stepped foot on hard water in your entire region combined. You still fish nearly every day of the season, not for tournaments anymore, mostly alone, sometimes with your own kids, who've been drilling their own small holes since they were 6, the exact age you wish you'd started instead of 9. You still remember the sound the ice made under your boots the first time your dad walked you out onto Lake Winnebago in the dark. That deep groan rolling underneath you that you didn't understand yet, and were half convinced meant something was about to give way. You understand it completely now. It's the sound of a frozen world holding you up. One most people never trust enough to walk out onto, but one that has fed you, financially and otherwise, for over 40 years. You know which lakes lock up early, and which ones never fully freeze even in the coldest years. You know the specific silence of a lake at 5 a.m. before anyone else has drilled a single hole. A silence you were chasing before you ever had words for what you were chasing. And somewhere right now, a 9-year-old is standing on a frozen pond for the first time, sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at a rod tip that hasn't moved in 20 minutes, cold, bored, completely unconvinced any of this is worth the numbness in their fingers. Then the tip dips, barely, The kind of twitch they'd miss if they blinked. They set the hook. Something pulls back. They have no idea yet how far that one twitch is about to take them. How many frozen lakes it leads to. How many mornings before sunrise. How many versions of themselves it will require them to become before they're the ones standing on the ice 30 years from now, watching someone else's kid feel it for the first time. On some other frozen lake, in some other cold truck, with some other adult who taps their boot twice on the ice and says it's plenty thick, trust me, and means it the exact same steady way your own dad meant it. All those cold winters ago on Lake Winnebago, back before the sun had even fully come up over the water.